Hey, how's it going, everyone? In this video, we will be looking at a dividend portfolio that allowed someone to retire 10 years ago. Who is that someone? Well, meet Jerry. Jerry is a civil engineer for the state. Outside of work, he's big into volunteering for the Boy Scouts of America and coaching for his son's baseball team. He showers naked and wears the same pair of socks for an entire work week. On the investing side of things, Jerry is a patient, long-term investor that has been working and investing for the past 30 years. Now imagine with me that it's 2007 and Jerry is eyeballing retirement in the next few years. Based on his calculations, he should be good to go in 2010 if he lets his portfolio bake and cook a little more. Jerry's all excited and happy because by the middle of 2007, he's 49 years old and the market is doing great, which means his portfolio is looking phenomenal. Then the Great Recession hits and his portfolio takes a huge dip. So instead of retiring in 2010, he decides to stay in the workforce a little longer because he has anxiety about what the stock market will do next. And he feels like he needs more time to let his stocks recover. In 2010, he makes his last drastic portfolio adjustments, and he removes a lot of the banking companies and replaces them with other big dogs in the S&P 500. Other than that, he works and invests as usual. Every year that passes, he builds up more hate and resentment towards his supervisor, but he reminds himself that he is working to put more money into his retirement portfolio. So he keeps showing up to work day after day, week after week. Fast forward, now it's 2015, and Jerry finally pushes the retirement button at the young age of 57. Now let me take a pause real quick in this story time. Some of us have no idea just how crazy the Great Recession really was. Your investments bought in 2007, what you see on your screen right now, October of 2007, it would have taken 5.5 years to break even in 2013. That's how big of an effect the Great Recession had on the stock market and people's portfolios. So before we go and judge Jerry, walk a mile in his shoes, his New Balance dad shoes. Imagine if you saw a retirement portfolio go from $1 million slowly turn into $500,000, not overnight, but over the span of a few months. So all I'm trying to say is that would even make David Goggins, who you see on your screen right now, toss and turn in bed. So what stocks did Jerry retire with? But first, a word from today's video sponsor, which is the skin tag on your left butt cheek. I'm just kidding. Now, Jerry wasn't the best stock picker in the world, so he just gravitated towards investing into the S&P 500 companies that he liked instead of the index fund. His stock investment criteria? Well, number one, the stock had to pay a dividend. And number two, the business model had to be easy to understand. If it was too complex, he passed on it. And number three, no. That's it. He only had 2 metrics. So how do you think he did? And as a reminder, in 2010, he made his last stock adjustments, and then Jerry just doubled down into the ones that he picked. So out of these 20 companies, which are the top dogs of the S&P 500 back in 2010, which ones do you think Jerry invested into? All right, well, these are the 10 that he invested into: Chevron, Cisco, Walmart, ExxonMobil, Apple, Johnson & Johnson, Microsoft, IBM, Procter & Gamble, and JP Morgan Chase. He had a weird fascination and fetish behind the number 10. So that's how many companies he held in his portfolio. So these companies right here were his lucky 10. And here's an overview of how they performed for the past 10 years with his 10 different holdings broken down and allocated by 10% each. And a little later on in the video, we're going to be looking at the detailed data. When we look at Jerry's portfolio against the S&P 500, what you see on the right side of your screen, they're pretty close in terms of performance, right? The initial $10,000 invested back in January 2015 would have yielded $35,000 in Jerry's portfolio of these 10 holdings, and then the S&P 500 went from $10,000 to $30,000. So it does in fact look like Jerry did outperform the market, but not by too much. The annual rate of return, the CAGR, year, the compound annual growth rate, 14.5% for Jerry's portfolio, meaning in a single year, his portfolio would have grown by 14.5%. Whereas the market, well, that was 12.5%. In Jerry's best year, his portfolio would have grown by 34%. For the market, it was 31.3%. Pretty negligible, pretty similar performance, and I'm pretty sure Jerry would have been happy in retirement from 2015 all the way up until now. And just to show you how close it really was, the dark blue color is Jerry's portfolio and the teal color is the market. It was a pretty close race up until recently. Up until 2022, they performed about the same. However, since 2022, Jerry's portfolio just took off. So what I think is Jerry, as an old man, must have been very happy with how his portfolio has performed. Now remember what I said earlier. Jerry did not consider himself to be like Warren Buffett. Instead, he just picked and chose companies that he believed would do well. However, when we look at his top 10 holdings, not all of them have been really good. As a matter of fact, 4 of the companies that he held, well, they brought down the total return potential. These 4 were like a pimple on a forehead. However, Apple and Microsoft and ExxonMobil really did carry the team. And if you're curious about the dividend yield of his portfolio, well then I got you. Finding old data isn't as easy as it should be. So using napkin math, I reached a conclusion that the dividend yield for his portfolio should have been somewhere around 3%, with the best one being Chevron and the weakest one being Apple. But overall, 3%. And now let's look at the numbers and data to see the details behind his 2015 retirement portfolio. So initially, he was going to retire with $1 million back in 2010. However, that Great Recession pushed back his plans, so he decided to extend his work and stay on the job. By doing that, instead, he retired with $1.5 million instead of the initial $1 million. And we're going to say from 2015 until now, his share appreciation rate for his portfolio was 11.5% year over year. The initial starting dividend yield is 3%, and the dividends are going to grow at a rate of 7.5% every year. And because Jerry is retired, he's not going to reinvest those dividends. Instead, he's using that income to pay for his expenses. And because Jerry is retired, he's not putting any more money towards the portfolio. So those are the parameters and variables we are playing with. So in about 10 years, his portfolio would have grown from $1.5 million to $4.4 million. And the total return, 197%. And the annual dividend income after 10 years should be around $93,000 a year in dividends. So I don't know about you, but every so often I'll stumble upon an article or a YouTube video talking about how a 20-year-old influencer marries a 80-year-old something millionaire because of love. No other reason besides love, of course. And I can't say that I blame them. That's the quickest way to get a big old millionaire dollar inheritance. So I think it's kind of funny, but it's also a little strange and weird, because if you're a 20-year-old influencer and your husband is like 87, I'm sure there's expectations in the bedroom, but at 87, I'm sure the most she is doing in the bedroom is probably just tucking him in. I don't know. I just think it's funny. But back to the video. So what you see on your screen right now is Jerry's dividend payments year after year in retirement. So in 2015, he would initially had $45,000 from his portfolio. And what you see on the bottom of your screen is the portfolio valuation. And as we fast forward throughout the years, in 2019, his portfolio would have given him $60,000 in dividends. His portfolio at the start of year 10 would have given him $86,000 in dividends and be roughly valued at $4 million. This right here is after 10 years. So at the end of 2024, his portfolio should be at $4.4 million and the dividend payout should be $93,000. If I'm Jerry, honestly, I would be pretty happy to see $45,000 in dividends grow all the way up to $93,000 today. Pretty happy guy. And keep in mind, this was based off an initial 3% dividend yield. So I guess that's the power of retiring with a $1.5 million portfolio. I know as you're watching this, some of you are probably still fixated on the fact that he invested into some of these companies. Like, how could Jerry do that? Come on, Jerry. And I'm going to defend Jerry right now because hindsight is 2020. We can criticize Jerry for his investment choices and decisions, but back in 2010, we wouldn't necessarily be be invested into what we consider to be great investments today, like Nvidia or Amazon or Google. What you see on your screen right now are the top dogs of the S&P 500 right now. But back then in 2010, it's a different picture. And if you are a fortune teller that did invest into those three companies, Nvidia, Amazon, or Google back then, I'll tell you right now, I will quit my minimum wage job and be your personal assistant. And when I say that, I'm only half kidding. And on that note of the past, back in 2007, I remember researching what college major and career field I wanted to get into. And I vividly recall petroleum engineering and anything related to the oil industry as high in demand, which is why Jerry went balls deep into ExxonMobil and Chevron. Today, the hot industry is tech and AI. But the real question is, what will dominate the market in the next 20 years? And why is the correct answer Visa? Interesting stuff, right? My takeaway from making this video is that if I invest into the top players and winners of the S&P 500, will I also be okay like Jerry? That's the question I'll be trying to answer while sitting on the toilet tomorrow morning. So until we meet next time, my friend, stay safe. I'll talk to you soon.